This is just flipping weird. Like, I seriously don't know how else to describe Joanne Kathleen Rowling's recent actions. She has to know that 2 of the 3 images she shared are completely garbled, so what's going on? Has she snapped? Is this some sort of super advanced 4D chess move? Or is it the mold speaking? Let's discuss. But first, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, lesbomisia, asmisia, antisemitism, ableism, and sexual violence. If our work has helped you, please consider supporting us via Patreon so I can keep the channel running. You can also help us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. I'd also just like to take this time to remind our viewers that statements made throughout our videos are the opinions of myself, the host, based on the evidence I have available to me. They are not and should not be taken as unquestionable fact, which is why we reference everything, because we're fallible. Thus we strive to give you, the viewer, the ability to check all evidence yourself in order to make up your own mind, which is what the reference numbers in the top left corner are for, being numbers that match up with the reference list found in the transcript linked down below. As such, we encourage all viewers to do their own research to reach an informed conclusion about the topic. Hi there, mine's Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and we need to talk about Joanne Kathleen Rowling publishing a video to her Twitter profile, clearly utilizing derivative AI to fabricate some sort of conspiracy, leading to entirely predictable results. So let's just get straight into things. On the 8th of September, Rowling posted that, quote, "Tell me again how gender identity ideology isn't homophobic. Would you trust this UK doctor who was suspended from practicing by the medical council and now heads up quasi-medical trans advocacy group Gender GP to be sympathetic to a young girl who's attracted to other girls?" End quote. And it's attached to this tweet that Rowling posted the following peculiar video. Now, there's 3 images displayed here, the first of which is an actual screenshot that we'll circle back to in a minute, but the second 2 are very clearly generated using derivative AI, that is to say, plagiarism machines that have been fed a bunch of images before a prompt was used to try and generate something. Now, what was Rowling trying to create in this instance? That's hard to tell. It reads to me like Rowling was attempting to fabricate screenshots of conversations between members of Gender GP in order to imply that there's some sort of organized conspiracy surrounding the term phallophobia, which was in the original screenshot. We've talked at length about how Rowling and the wider gender critical movement believes that trans youth, specifically trans boys and AFAB MB folk, are all naive white girls tricked into thinking that they're trans by a secret world order to decrease white fertility and destroy Western civilization. Keeping in mind that Rowling has explicitly supported those labeling trans people a quote-unquote civilization-ending concept, declaring one such person to be a quote-unquote heroine before finishing up with a kiss. As for the who, most gender-critical fascists keep things vague to hide what they're doing, but a couple, including Rowling's personal hero, Magdalene Burns, and Rowling's self-confessed battle buddy, Helen Joyce, have published materials asserting that it is specifically Jewish billionaires who are at the head of what is, as Joyce put it in her book, a quote-unquote global agenda that is apparently moulding society from the shadows. So straight up 1930s style antisemitism ripped from the pages of Nazi rag, Der Stumme. That's what Rowling seems to be trying to feed here, at least in my personal opinion. And it's easy to see why someone such as Rowling would turn to derivative AI to fabricate such evidence. Gender-critical fascists are constantly fighting an uphill battle against reality, with every single field of science, philosophy, and ethics standing in stark opposition to their bigoted ideology. This forces fascists to do what they have always done: lie, and lie hard. They lie about the desistance rates of trans youth. They lie about the necessity of gender-affirming care, and they lie about the apparent dangers posed by trans women, along with the notion that there's antagonism between trans women and cis lesbians. There isn't. In fact, between 84 to 94% of all cis lesbians, depending on generation, openly support their trans sisters and would like heterosexual shitheads like Rowling to stop talking over them and mind their own fucking business. Hell, Rowling herself has been caught out lying multiple times, including her accusations that Imane Halef is secretly intersex, the assertion that trans women have stolen over 900 medals from cis women, to her assertion that trans people were not one of the groups targeted by the Nazis during the Holocaust. That last one, by the way, can be argued to legally constitute a denial of Nazi crimes, including the Holocaust, at least going off of a 2022 ruling by the Cologne Regional Court, after another gender-critical fascist made similar statements to Rowling. Isn't it fucking lovely how any conversation on Rowling, a children's author promoted to millions of children, is like a counter ticking down till when we make it back to our connections to the OG Nazis of Nazi Germany. And by lovely, I mean fucking terrifying. But I can see why such fabricator slop would pique Rowling's interest. It's a low-cost way to throw the vibe out there that there's a secret order of Jewish people, at least according to our friends, pulling the strings when it comes to trans healthcare, like that offered by Gender GP. It's a salient reminder of the fact that there is no lie that a gender-critical fascist, Rowling included, won't sink to. Because the moment you've used derivative AI to forge evidence, where do you go from there? There is no more down. So whilst it's fun to joke that this might be the mole speaking to her, making her see things that aren't there, it's important that we never lose sight of the fact that, no, this is just typical ideologically driven bigotry. This is what that leads to. There's a reason the OG Nazis had to fabricate so much bullshit to present themselves as the superior people, and whilst the tools might be different, the overall tactic remains the same. Lie through their fucking teeth to convince the rest of society that they should exterminate trans people along with every other perceived degenerate. And sadly, it seems to be paying off, with said forgery having received more than 5,000 likes. That's 5,000 gender-critical sadasses sharing an obviously fake video because it aligns with their ideological agenda, 5,000 people without an iota of critical thought between them, 5,000 people who want nothing more than to swallow Rowling's lies without a first thought, let alone a second thought. That's why, for all the other shit going on right now, this is what I've chosen to concentrate on. If you want a piece on Kirk, go watch Catherine of Bridget Empire's video on the matter, as she's already covered everything so damn well. Maybe also check out her Patreon whilst you're there. Though, on the topic of gender-critical fascist lying, it's time to take a look at the one image that wasn't fabricated, which gives us some context on what Rowling was likely trying to do here. And that's the first image shown, which is a screenshot of an exchange between Dr. Helen Weberly and a gender-critical fascist. Now, why include a real screenshot at all? Well, it kinda reminds me of what you see in movies, where one gang will present another gang a case of money, only for the other gang to flick through a random wad of notes. And the reason for that is because it'd be very easy to have all the top notes in a case be real notes, only to have counterfeit notes behind them. I kinda can't help but wonder if that's what Rowling is doing here, using a single random screenshot to make it look like the video contains further evidence of her conspiracy, when it doesn't. Now, Dr. Weberly has been frequently targeted by gender-critical fascists. She's a target because she founded Gender GP, a private service that offers appropriate gender-affirming care in line with international standards. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that Gender GP is perfect, there are absolutely valid criticisms of it as a provider, specifically those raised by actual trans people. I've heard fellow trans people criticize their monetization with a £195 setup fee, a £30 monthly membership, a £65 first-time consultation fee, and the £30 consultation fee for all subsequent consultations. Having both a monthly membership and a consultation fee feels extortionate to me, even as a trans adult, and I don't get why there's a £195 setup fee when the first consultation already cost £35 extra. And that's without any blood test, which added together are gonna cost hundreds of pounds extra and need to be repeated, though I don't know if GenderGP does these themselves or if they're referrals, and if they're referrals, whether GenderGP gets a cut of that. I don't know. But it seems a lot to me as someone who grew up in council housing after the domestic violence refuge. I don't see this avenue as accessible to trans people from said backgrounds, particularly trans youth. Yet sadly, it's largely the only option, or was the only option until recently, excluding DIY. It does feel excessive, especially considering Dr. Webley's own personal history, but that could also be my ignorance of private healthcare in the UK since I've never used it. Fact is, that's not why gender-critical fascists have targeted GenderGP and by extension Dr. Webley. They do so because it's one of the few remaining avenues for trans people in the UK to receive essential gender-affirming care, the kind which is known to protect trans youth from severe mental health deterioration, including suicidal ideation. That's why Rowling brings up the fact that Dr. Webley had her medical license suspended in 2022 after a protracted 4-year battle, yet left out the fact that Dr. Webley appealed and won, restoring said license in 2023. Now, since then, Dr. Webley's license has lapsed, that is to say, she didn't renew it. More specifically, according to an official statement put out by Dr. Webley, she couldn't renew it because the UK's medical system refused to let her specialise in trans healthcare. This was in spite of the medical tribunal finding that, quote, Dr. Webley answered technical questions about hormone therapies unhesitatingly and authoritatively. The tribunal was impressed by the depth and breadth of her knowledge of endocrinology and gender dysphoria. The tribunal was in no doubt that Dr. Webley had immersed herself in the field of transgender healthcare to the extent that she could properly be described as a GP with special interest in gender dysphoria, both in respect of the psychological and the endocrine facets of this field of medical practice. End quote. Yet again, she was blocked from applying for a specialist license under the UK's regulatory body. Though, since she's no longer personally involved in patient care and is therefore not practicing, Dr. Webley has instead chosen to focus her efforts on acting as CEO of GenderGP, rather than continue what was, by 2024, a 6-year legal battle in which she was punished even when she technically won her case, being acknowledged as a specialist by the medical tribunal's standards. Yet, if you went purely by what Rowling asserted here, most people would assume that she was suspended for medical malpractice rather than having opted to move on to a non-practicing role after a UK medical tribunal found her to have an impressive knowledge of both endocrinology and gender dysphoria. So that's another way Rowling has lied to her millions of followers, since, again, she just can't help herself. As for Dr. Webley's post itself, it reads as, quote, Have you ever noticed that the only argument they have is that if you have a willy, you must be a man? I wonder whether an absolute fear of willies is what drives them. Phallophobes need help. Bless them. 'Cause some people find willies really scary. Eggplant emoji, shocked emoji, lip-biting emoji. End quote. To which a gender-critical fascist replied with, quote, "There is something very wrong with you," end quote, leading Dr. Webley to reply with quote, "But at least I ain't scared of willies, thumbs up emoji," end quote. So a shitpost, with Dr. Webley not only using willy, but literally misspelling both really and scary in a cutesy fashion. That's what Rowling is pretending is something sinister, a goddamn shitpost in which Dr. Webley takes the mick out of hypocritical gender-critical fascists. Now, why do I say hypocritical? Well, because gender-critical fascists don't actually fear the phallus, even those belonging to predatory and abusive people, as seen in how Rowling is 100% okay being friends with known male domestic abusers, under UK ruling, such as Johnny Depp, and self-confessed rapists, such as Marilyn Manson. It's only when a penis is attached to an innocent woman that it suddenly becomes predatory or abusive. At least in Rowling's mind and the minds of her fellow gender-critical fascists. Only then does it become transgressive, marking it as an Überschwanz, as gender-critical fascists might call it once they decide to fully adopt their Nazi roots, because trans girl penis is just apparently so much more powerful than cis guy penis. Rowling's post reminds me of the fake outrage by anti-feminists over the whole cis male tears mug during Gamergate and the rise of the alt-right and online manosphere, people who, surprise, are currently standing shoulder to shoulder with Rowling and her Prosecco stormtroopers. But yeah, Dr. Webley isn't promoting hate against a protected group, she isn't sexually degrading anyone, all she's doing is making fun of a group of fascists with a history of violently targeting the trans community. That's entirely reasonable. And I get the implication Rowling is trying to make here in labeling reality, what she calls gender ideology, and by extension Dr. Webley, homophobic, implying that Dr. Webley is attacking all cis lesbians for not wanting to date trans women, when no, that's not what she's doing. First, reminder that Rowling is an allo-cishet woman and is not part of the LGBT+ community at all, and has no authority or voice on our topics. Second, many cis lesbians love trans women, both non-op and post-op. That's actually where this argument began, with a small group of bigoted cis lesbians attacking other cis lesbians, declaring them to be fake lesbians, violently erasing them because they love trans women. When said bigots were naturally told to fuck off and mind their own business, they began lying and asserting that other lesbians loving trans women was the same as them being pressured to date trans women. Which is just patently false. Trans women do not want to date vile bigots with such ugly-ass personalities. We just need them to leave us and our lesbian girlfriends alone. And third, it is a very small group of bigoted cis lesbians, because even out of all cis lesbians who aren't interested in non-op trans women, the majority don't feel the need to make targeting and abusing trans women, declaring all trans women predators, their entire personality. They certainly don't abuse other cis lesbians for dating non-op trans lesbians. They just don't date non-op trans women themselves. That is a proportionate response, and again, I have the statistics on this. Between 84 and 94% of all cis lesbians support their trans sisters, and would very much like allo-cishet shitheads like Rowling to shut the fuck up and stop lying. Not just because she's speaking over them, but because Rowling is an actual danger to the entire lesbian community. As explained in our video, how J.K. Rowling turned Harry Potter into a symbol of hate, Rowling personally donated at least $70,000 of her Harry Potter royalties to the gender-critical group directly responsible for the Supreme Court ruling in 2024. A ruling that excluded trans people from the legal definition of their gender, which has since been used to argue that they should be excluded from single-gender spaces, stripping them of rights they've enjoyed without incident since 2010. This unleashed a wave of violence upon any woman not seen as stereotypically feminine enough by gender-critical fascist standards, including breast cancer survivors, dark-skinned women, and yes, cis lesbians, who are more likely to reject said patriarchal norms. This is something we knew would happen, and Rowling had been warned about for years, with said phenomenon having been reported on as far back as 2016. Rowling chose to unleash actual violence upon cis lesbians, some of it sexual violence, yet she still presumes to speak for cis lesbians, 84 to 94% of who fucking disagree with her violent bigotry, possibly even more so since said Supreme Court ruling. And that needs to be called the fuck out. Rowling also openly mocked the asexual community earlier this year, labeling the violence they suffer, quote-unquote, fake oppression. This was her violently erasing the established facts that asexual people are 3 times more likely to be raped, and this is under the UK's very narrow definition of rape as penetrative sexual violence by a penis, than cis women are to be sexually assaulted in general. Again, actual horrific shit beating down on rape victims as claiming fake oppression. That is her legacy. That is what Rowling is, and that is what you support if you defend her. End of. And let's not pretend like this is an issue of professionalism, considering that Rowling, someone who made it as a children's author and is thus followed by countless children, told gay rights hero Peter Thatchell to jump off a roof and kill himself because he acknowledged the scientific fact that sex in biology isn't simple, as well as reply to a literal 9-year-old child who shared a drawing with her on Twitter with a transphobic rant. Again, Dr. Webley wasn't demonizing a protected group, she wasn't sexually degrading anyone, she wasn't interacting in a space with children, she made a shitpost on a dying hell site at the expense of violent fascists who have spent years terrorizing her. This isn't a pot calling the kettle black style hypocrisy, this is a pot calling the silverware black. So yeah, that's the story. More pearl clutching and outright fabrications by Rowling designed to demonize the trans community and its allies for refusing to fall on our swords at her demand. It's a clear example of why not a single word Rowling says, or even images she shares, can be trusted. She has, and will likely continue to fabricate, evidence since she and her ideologically driven hate movement have none to work with. I guess we could say reality is JK critical. Though, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the derivative AI Rowling used? What do you think about the 5,000 people who shared said fabrications? How can we combat such forgeries? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to help keep us running, please consider becoming one of our wonderful patrons who make our work possible. You can also make a one-time donation via PayPal or Super Thanks on YouTube. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Flynn, Bo Ayer, Deborah Goldsmith, Higgins the Seagull, Jackie Sins, Mix Alba, and Peter Cole. And for myself, Adita and Levi, take care now.